Welcome to TechPoutine.
Really happy to be sitting here with Gabriel Ian and the one and the only Philip Telio. Phil, really excited that you accepted to be on the pod. Since I'm the one kind of emceeing, I'm going to ask a selfish question to start. We're going to talk a lot about Startupfest. It's the 15-year anniversary this year. It's crazy. We were sharing some of the war stories. I want to go all the way back to Startup Camp, which is the original notion, right? And then Startupfest. Why the fuck did you how did you come up with this idea? What motivated you to do this 15 years ago to go along this journey?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I've obviously listened to your podcast many times. I'm surprised it's taking you so long to call me, but I'm very happy to be here. I think it's wonderful what you guys do. The history of Startup Fest. Yeah, indeed. We were running smaller events first called Startup Camp, which were really just evening events. Like most people that start an event, it's okay, we're going to run a party in the evening and it's going to be for 50 people kind of thing. And that took on a life of its own. Really, we were doing that twice a year. And it just grew and grew. Every time we did it, there was more and more demand until at one point there was an opportunity. We didn't have any space anymore, so we had to rent more space. And all of a sudden it was going to cost more money. So I said, I'm going to get people to pay for it because I've got no way to cover those costs. And realized pretty quickly that 100 people bought tickets, which kind of inspired me to say, okay, there's a hunger in the market. At that point, I think we were 750 people coming to Startup Camp. And so we launched it out as naively as we did. Thank God I didn't know what I know today because I don't think I ever would have done it.
What year was that, the Startup Camp, the first one?
Startup Camp, I think the first one was probably in 2007, 2008. And we ran 2 of those a year.
And why startups? So what led you, did you already have an interest in startups? What led you down, this is like an unexplored niche?
I've always been part of the startup community. The first companies I worked for were small tech companies. They grew from 6, 8 people up to 350 people. So that's where I had gotten my education, if you want, as a
Can you name a few of those? I'm curious.
Sure. The first company was Public Technologies Multimedia. We were the first company in Montreal doing websites because in 1992, there were no websites. And also when that came along, World Wide Web, we jumped on that opportunity, the company did. And we were building all the first big websites in Montreal. Then I got recruited into Locus Dialogue, a speech technology company. In those days, there were only 3 companies in the world really doing speech tech. We were the third of 3, but that eventually got acquired by Nuance Technology.
Right.
And so
I was going to ask if that was related.
Yeah. And then when we got acquired, that got acquired by actually, prior to being acquired by Nuance, it was acquired by a company out of Seattle. I can't believe I don't remember. Anyways, they wanted me to move to Seattle and I had no interest in leaving. My wife was pregnant. And so I stuck around and very naturally got into consulting like many people. You're out of a job and people are calling you up to ask for your advice and stuff like that. So I started to consult. And I was consulting to very large corporations, Bell Canada, Orange, Hawaiian Telecom. But I always loved startups. And what we were doing with the large corporations was really helping them think more innovatively. Their lunch was being eaten by Vonage and stuff like that at that point in time. Dial pads, long distance rates were going away. And all these large corporates were looking for new revenue streams and figuring out how to use tech. And that's really what spurred Startup Camp was, how do I get back to bringing this startup innovation community to connect with these large corporates? In those days, we used to say we were bringing together the t-shirts and the suits. And nobody was doing that in those days. T-shirts were in a basement somewhere or in a cafe, and the suits just had no interest. But pretty quickly, they got on board.
I remember the day that you came into Notman House to pitch Startup Fest to a bunch of people in the community. As if, for some reason, I remember you and Greg Eisenberg coming
It's possible Greg Eisenberg was there.
and you revealed the name, which is, I find, a perfect name for Montreal. It's like Montreal's the city of festivals.
That's changed a bit too, right? Because it used to be the International Startup Fest.
Correct. And the name was inspired by the other festivals in Montreal. Once I came to this idea that, we could do something more than a campy event in the evenings, I thought to myself, well, there's an international jazz fest and there's an international movie festival and there's an international comedy festival. So why not an international startup festival?
Yeah. The domain was available.
The domain was available. Yeah. So I called a few people. Like any good idea, I think what you naturally do is you call up some people that you trust and you pitch them the idea and you see. Now, just because people tell you it's a crazy idea and it's a bad idea doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And some people did think it was a crazy idea. I remember Andy Nullman saying to me, I think it's a wonderful idea. So you're going to do it in 2012? And I was like, no, we're going to do this in 6 months. I said, don't do that. You're never going to be able to pull this off in 6 months. Give yourself 18 months. In the startup world, the velocity is one of the most important things. You're going to spend a lot more time, money, effort. If I wait 18 months, I'll never make it.
And Andy's been intertwined with the festival from the beginning. For people who don't know Andy, can you talk about that relationship?
Sure. Andy Nullman is the founder of the Just for Laughs, the Anglo side of the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. And when we came up with the idea that we were going to do this, we knew that we wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to do this in summertime because it's a festival in Montreal and naturally this should happen in summer. And then I was looking around the world at the other event that was really the most popular at the time, which was South by Southwest. And I thought, well, here they are. They've got this music component.
Which is in March,
film
right?
Component. It's in March. And I went to it before our event was in July. So the first real event I'd gone to was in March there. But I knew that it was a good idea, or it seemed like it was a good idea to add that there'd be some component of culture as part of Startupfest. And I gave it some thought in terms of Jazz Fest was an option. The F1 was an option. Oceaga at the time didn't exist. And I think if Oceaga existed, I probably would have aligned with Oceaga.
Yeah, interesting.
But Just for Laughs struck me as probably the most horizontal, universally appreciated thing. Not everybody's going to love jazz and not everybody's going to like the F1. And I didn't know Andy at all at that time, but he put out a blog post and I read it and I thought I was intrigued. And so I just sent him a message and he agreed to meet with me. I showed up to his office that was a museum. He had this gorgeous office in the Just for Laughs building. And I brought up a thing of Pringles because something in his blog post talked about Pringles, and I thought that'll resonate. I think he fell in love with me at that point pretty quickly. And ever since then, and we're really good friends at this point. He joined the board. We did create a nonprofit at one point. We don't operate as a nonprofit anymore, but for a period of time we did. And he is still to this day the president of that board.
I love that story because I've never met Andy face to face, but I've seen you two interact together many times. And it's crazy because the interaction and the connection is so strong. I thought you guys were like buddies since elementary school or something like that.
That's what I thought.
No, I was just always a huge fan. What I liked about Andy was he was an entrepreneur. When I saw him, he had gone back to Just for Laughs. So he was at Just for Laughs, and that's really where he started his career. And then he went off and did a mobile company with a couple of other entrepreneurs, super successful. They sold it, bought it back, sold it again. And then he was inspired to go back to Just for Laughs, and that's when I caught him. So I didn't know him at all before that, other than he's one of these original entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs in Montreal. These guys were doing like games.
This was Oz, right?
Mobile phones.
Was it Oz?
It got acquired by Oz. It was called, just my memory is really not as good as it used to be. So I'll remember it and I'll let you know in the notes.
The story I heard about how when this festival was going to happen was told to me by Alistair. And there may be some truth here, but I want to ask you. He had told me that he had looked at the least rainy week of the summer over a period of 10, 15, or 20 years.
Looking at the date.
Yeah, and that was the week that was like historically the less rain in the city, and that's why it would be during that week. True or false?
First of all, Alistair, for those that don't know Alistair is now my business partner in a couple of events that we run. Alistair wasn't one of those original people that I pitched to. I didn't know Alistair at the time, but of those 8 people that I had pitched to at Notman House in those early years, one of them was Ben Yoskovitz. And at the time, he was a journalist also. He was doing one of the first podcasts, newsletters kind of thing. And when I left that room, Ben knew Alistair really well. Ben called up Alistair and said, hey, have you heard of Phil Telio? He wants to run this event. Alistair was already big into conferences in the US, and he was running data conferences and stuff. So he called me up and said, I want to get involved. And I said, okay, who is this guy? What does he want? And he was pretty clear. He said, look, I don't want anything. I don't expect to make any money off of this. I'm willing to give you all of my talents and all of my time and all of my effort.
And connections.
Just don't ask me for any money. So don't ask me for money, but I don't expect any money. And really for 7, 8 years, Alistair worked on Startup Fest, quite dedicated and never asked for anything. Eventually we formalized the relationship because he was just so important in the event.
Yeah.
And actually he brought me the first employee into Startup Fest, which is his sister, Rebecca, another wonderful person, because when I decided we were going to run this first event at what's now the Grand Quai, at the time was the Alexandra Pier, I'd never run an event. And within about 2 weeks, I realized I can't do all this. But yeah.
But you haven't answered my question yet. True or false?
There's a little bit of mythology in that, no doubt. There was an alignment with Just for Laughs in those dates, but I guess we were probably looking at, should we do it the week before the week after? And yes, in Alistair fashion, he said, well, the way we're going to take this decision is with data. And so we're going to look up the most beautiful week of the year. And it was, at the time, it always was beautiful at
we used
Startupfest.
to joke around that you had some sort of magical machine. For the first 10 years, it never rained.
Exactly. We got gorgeous weather all the time. We used to say actually that Rebecca was responsible for the weather. So she had something that she would do leading up to Startupfest, but somehow either she stopped doing that thing or the weather has just shifted because now we get tornadoes and
in
stuff.
true fashion, you do everything go big or go home. And so the year it really rained,
yeah,
we had a tornado.
And we've had a couple of years where we've had to evacuate the village. There was one, we've had 2 tornado warnings and had to evacuate the village twice. And then the year that we were on the island on Parc de Dieppe in 2018, where we had the boats going from the old port, it poured rain for the first 15 minutes of the event. We thought, oh my God, what a mistake. We're on this island. There was zero infrastructure, zero power, no washrooms, brought it all in, of course. But all of a sudden we realized how exposed we were. And then it went away. And then it was the most beautiful week. So we've been lucky.
Honestly, some of my best memories of Startup Fest is related to the crazy weather. It's in those moments that you get to kind of huddle with other people and find shelter that you build tighter relationships. And it's part of the
Nectar, you were there in 2023 when there was the tornado. That was pretty major. We had lightning that was striking in the water. And yes, we evacuated the tents. We evacuated the tower at the Grand Quai. And when you say that adversity brings people together, great experiences, whether they're negative or positive, definitely bring people together. And so, everybody rifled out. And there was this feeling of I survived. And I remember you were caught on video. I can't remember whose video it was. I think it was
Sun.
It was Sun. Yeah, Sun was interviewing you during the tornado. And you were like, I survived Startupfest 2023, which we turned into a pin in 2024. We created this tornado pin and everybody was clamoring for that pin. Everybody loved it. So,
You mentioned like the specific, let's say, cataclysmic events that bring people together. Remember specifically the tornado where it's like, that evening, everyone's huddled into the bars and you have this sense of survivorship. But how have you managed to continue keeping the community thriving, right? Like outside of the the specific, let's say, isolated incidents of rain, etc. But you've been able to build and grow and foster this community, right?
Can I add to that? Because I was going in the same place. There's been many other events in the same style in Canada that have come and gone. What is it about Startup Fest that you've been able to do consistently for 15 years now, and hopefully another 15 or more?
Maybe a little bit of insanity. Why have we been able to survive 15 years where others... Look, there's a couple of reasons, because there have been many times where, and I think other entrepreneurs can appreciate this, where you're ready to throw in the towel. Keep in mind, we went through a pandemic, and for events, that was like a cataclysmic event. And that was one of the times that I was considering saying, okay, that was fun.
I'm done.
That was great. We're done. But the team really was totally into it. The team kept me motivated. And I don't think if it wasn't for the team, which, look, we're super lucky at Startupfest. We've got the same team. Our core team of senior managers have all been around for 14 to 15 years on the 15 years of Startupfest. And so that's certainly a big part of it. So we're a tight group of people that love what we do. But above and beyond that, we always try and come up with new things that are fresh. We kill the things that don't work, and then we amplify the things that work. And it's that constant, an event is a rinse and repeat reality. Yes, you have your history, you've got your database, and so you've got something to leverage for the following year. But every year when it ends, you start a new one. And the question is, what are we doing and how many stages are we doing? And at some point we started to add prizes and we added grandmothers at some point, and then we added mentors. And so there's just that you got to keep it fresh. But the other wonderful thing about this community is it refreshes itself. So there's always like a 50% of the audience that have been to many events. Some people have been to literally all 15 events. Lots of people have been to 10 of the events and 5 of the events. But there's always this 50% of the audience which is brand new, pie-eyed, great ideas, bad ideas, but great energy. And it's really just our enjoyment of what we do, I think, and our desire to continue to make it happen. And then the community that's there.
I think hearing you talk, I'm just thinking about other events. And I think that's a really important point that you bring up, is that most events differentiate year per year by the speakers and pretty much the speakers. Whereas every year there's been some novelty at Startupfest, which I think is probably a big piece of it.
Yeah, we're actually a little bit of the opposite. There are some speakers that come that we invite back year after year. Yeah. People like Randy Smerick, Chris Shipley, Jeremy Edberg. They're so good. And because a lot of people just haven't met them yet because they're new. So we actually have this faculty that come back over and over. And actually, when we came back from the pandemic, we didn't want to take the risk because pre-pandemic, that last year, we were about 7,000 people. And we came back after the pandemic. I had no idea if anybody was going to show up. So we scaled it down, way down to one stage. Pre-pandemic, we had 6 stages, I think, at the height. So we scaled it back to one stage, but a lot of our speakers wanted to come. And we just had no room for them. Rebecca and Alistair put on their thinking hats and decided to create this sort of cohort of mentors. We said, look, if we can't have you speak, but we'd like you to mentor. And so we're going to do these roundtable discussions. And that just took off. And the philosophy at that point became less talking heads and more heads talking. So less people on stage professing to an audience of people and far more people having interactive conversations. And post-pandemic, I think that really resonated. People really wanted to connect more than sit there in a room and listen, because everything went online. There's so much content out there for entrepreneurs to listen to as a podcast or others.
Gabriel, I have a question for you. We talked about the tornado, but what's one of your top Startup Fest moments? Funny or terrifying?
Startup Fest has been a big part of my life. I went to the first Startup Fest and I've been going every year since. My family's now involved. My daughter volunteers. She's on her 4th year volunteering. And it's funny, there's so many different experiences, and you reminded me about a lot of them. I love the version on the island, and taking the boat across the river was really cool. I've always loved Startup Fest because it feels like, for me, a moment to see a lot of people that I haven't seen all year, because I've been heads down working, and it almost feels like a summer barbecue where you can be outside and you can be with people and you can catch up on what you've been doing. But probably it's very personal, but the memory that comes to mind was the COVID event that you held, which was probably how many people? 50?
Yeah, that was pretty surprising to all of us, I think. We had canceled the event. The pandemic was whatever in like February or so, we canceled it. It was supposed to happen in July. But then at one point, I think around May, June, the government decided they were going to open things up and we could have 50 people could gather. Yeah. And there was just a very short window of about a month where that was permitted. 50 people could gather. They wanted weddings to happen and birthday parties and stuff like that. And so we decided, okay, we're going to run a Startupfest, but we're not just going to do a virtual event. We really didn't want to do virtual events for Startupfest. But we said, okay, we are willing to do. I thought I put that on silent.
It's all right. You got a festival to run in a few weeks. I'm sure you got a lot of calls coming in.
Yeah, we just set up a studio. At that time, Videotron was still a big partner of ours, and their crews, nobody had anything to do. Everybody was out of a job all of a sudden. And so we called up Videotron and said, we'd like to do a studio in the old port, and we're going to set up a tent, one single tent that can accommodate 50 people. We want a stage. They sent us crews from TVA, and we had TV station quality broadcast from the old port. Yeah, it was a fun year. I like that year also.
It was amazing for me to see the quality of the studio that was put together. And that actually was the first edition of Startup Fest that my daughter attended. And since it was small, and my daughter was 13 at the time, I felt comfortable bringing her because it wasn't going to be too overwhelming. And she actually heard Andy speaking, and that got her hooked.
Yeah, we love having people from the community bring their kids to work at Startup Fest. If anybody out there has good kids, send them our way.
Yeah, I remember. So I think I've been involved in every festival except for one year, for medical reasons. But I remember the very first one of the speakers was Dave McClure. And typically Startup Fest is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And for some reason, Dave was the first speaker on Friday morning. And I remember Rebecca going, "Where the fuck is David?" And when he finally got on, when we finally found him, I was doing mics for people. So I put the mic on him and he gets on the podium and I remember he goes, "Where the fuck were you guys last night? Because you weren't with me because I'm fucking hungover." And the whole crowd was like, "Oh my God, we're going, what are we going to see?" Because remember, for year one, right? This guy is not, people knew him in the community at large, but in Montreal, probably not all that much.
Wasn't at the time.
So people, I remember the face and people they're
But
like,
I
"What is
forgot
going on?"
that you were our volunteer on miking people up in that first year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Julian Smith was our MC.
Yeah,
that
it
year,
was,
if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, one stage was Julian Smith and I was miking him up. And the other stage, I forget who it was.
Probably Alistair.
It was Marc-Antoine Ross who was the mic.
Who was the miking? Yeah.
That's
yeah,
how I
so
met
we
Mark.
had some pretty successful entrepreneurs.
I was going to say, I feel like when there should be like a pipeline sharing agreement or something.
Talking about Dave McClure, so I'm 95% sure this is accurate. From what I remember, the story was Hamed from Stay 22 was at Startup Fest and wanted to pitch Dave McClure. And he didn't have time because he had to go to the airport. Hamed got in a taxi.
Yeah.
Pitched him on the way to the airport in the taxi and then got a check.
Yeah, I do remember that.
There's actually more to that story because he had said that his computer had broken down.
Oh.
And he didn't have access to a computer and he couldn't afford to buy a computer. And
he was a CJ student.
He was a student at the time, and Dave wired him money to buy a computer without even suggesting. He just got his email address and wired him some cash.
Wow.
Yeah, Dave McClure was one of the originals to help us get this off the ground because I knew that I needed international, it was called the International Startup Festival.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do, of course, more than just put Montrealers on stage. And so I reached out to a few people, Chris Shipley, Dave McClure, and I can't remember who else, but he was instrumental in helping us find some of our early speakers. And he was one of the biggest, most well-known investors at the time.
He was everywhere back then, right?
He was, yeah. Of course, he got into quite a bit of trouble around that Me Too era and is unfortunately no longer part of the community for obvious reasons. But yeah, he was an important part of our kickoff for sure.
What's your story other than the hurricane?
Yeah, I think that one is such top of the list, right? I find it's hard
when
to beat.
was your first Startup Fest?
Oh, God. I want to say, I think I was working at Google at the time. So it was like probably, the first one was like 2011 you mentioned. So it was like right around then. Like, I don't know if I went to the actual first one, but 2011, 2012, I remember going the first time. And I think for me, it was also the first time like being involved in the startup community around that time. And I was like, even though I'd been working in like digital marketing, wasn't really close to startups. And seeing this ragtag group of rebels and the spirit, it's just a weird kind of content. Like, for instance, I don't think it was existed back then, but it's for me, the quintessential Startup Fest content is like the grandma pitch, right? Where it's like,
oh yeah,
it's okay. That's what Startup Fest is. It's like a little bit off the center. It's not your like sterile event. You go there to really be part of the startup community.
Yeah, things like that, I guess, are part of what make us original and different and why we still do what we do. It was part, what do we do that's different? But it was also like, we recognized pretty quickly that all the judges, when we did a prize, and all the judges were guys at the time. There literally were no investors. They were women at the time, or practically none. And Alistair and Rebecca, since way before inclusion and diversity was a thing, they were always minded in that direction. They recognized that this is all white dudes, gray hair, balding, and they decided to go out and see what could we do different. And that year we did teenage judges and we did grandmother judges. And we're really just going to look for one judge in each case. With the Gazette, the Montreal Gazette, those days it was in print, they published an article that we were looking for grandmother judges for Startupfest.
No way.
We got 70 nominations in that year for
wow.
I want to be a grandmother judge. And so we thought, okay, I can't turn down that many grandmothers. So we ended up by creating a panel of grandmothers, and it's stuck. And actually, the most successful startup to ever come out of Startup Fest was chosen by the grandmother judges, not by the investor judges.
Wow. What about the elevator pitch? That's a big component of your history as well, right?
That is, yeah. That was straight from year one. And that came from a conversation with Andy Nallman again, because we were going to originally do that first event. We were trying to do it at Just for Laughs. So we were going to use their venue. And so Andy was walking me around Place des Arts, showing me the different spaces that we could potentially use. We didn't end up by using their space because logistically very complicated to deal with the Just for Laughs when you're just a small nobody that nobody knows. They didn't take us seriously at all, the logistics team. Andy did. But in walking around, we get to this big elevator at Place des Arts. They've got an elevator you can drive an 18-wheel truck into it. And he says, "Oh, we've got this 18-wheel truck elevator that you could run an event in here." And he really just said it as tongue in cheek. I went home that night and I thought, "Oh my God, that's genius. We need to do, I want that as a venue. Yeah, I want the elevator pitches and set up a stage and we'll put seating in it and it'll go up and down." But then that didn't work out because we weren't doing it with Just for Laughs. We went to the Grand Quai again. People thought we were crazy going to at the time, the Quai Alexandra. But they had this little elevator that just went up one floor and down one floor, super slow, 30 seconds up, 30 seconds down. And we said, okay, let's do the elevator pitches there. And then originally we thought, some people were criticizing us. They thought, oh, you're going to make entrepreneurs wait and line up. And what are you talking about? And so, okay, we're going to do it for an hour, whatever. We knew it was a hit because not only did we have to keep it open for 4 or 5 hours, people just refused to not line up, but we had investors coming to us, asking us, I think it might have been John Stokes, asking us whether he could go in the elevator and press the up and down button because he hated the idea that he was missing out on listening to the pitch. And at that point, we knew we had some idea there. And then we spun it out. We called,
we took that on a tour.
Yeah, we created an event called the Elevator World Tour where we decided we're going to take over only the most impressive elevators in the most impressive startup cities in the world. And we did things like the Eiffel Tower and the ICC in Hong Kong.
Toronto too. I remember when Nora pitched Missouri.
Correct.
Everyone was like, "Oh my God, that was
one of the
best pitches,
best startup
incredible."
Competition.
Yeah,
second for second, it was 60 seconds. And yeah, like any startup, you always want to test your idea first. We had this idea to do this international thing, but we thought we got to first maybe do something at home. The CN Tower was the obvious. It was the most impressive tower in Canada, and I got told no from the CN Tower for months. I was being told no from everybody until I finally found the one person, because dog with a bone in its mouth, I refused to, I was refusing the no. And I finally found somebody that said yes. And yeah, in effect, Noor from Missouri was the winner that year. She gave a spectacular pitch.
Incredible pitch.
We'll find that video. I'm sure it's online.
We have it.
Put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the best pitches. Missouri, amazing company and a founder.
I remember because I was running Founder Fuel back then and I was there to see the companies. And after that pitch, I went to her. I'm like, "You got to come to Founder Fuel." She turned me down. And then the year after I had left, Sylvain took over Founder Fuel. And then she was in the program and I ended up working with her through the cohort.
It's a
crazy company.
Founder Fuel company.
We should get her back to do a pitch this year.
Or a mentor, right? That company's on fire from what I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about what's next. So we're a bit less than a month away of the 15-year celebration. So what's in store? I know obviously the agenda's live, but yeah, maybe give us a high-level sales pitch of what's coming up.
I guess, what I'll say is it's our 15th year. So it's pretty exciting. Anytime you get these anniversaries that are increments of 5 or 10, there's always some exciting sense to it. Of course, we're going to have, as we've always had, great speakers. We've got 3 stages. This year, I'm excited because we've grown the prizes. And so in a year where, and I listened to your podcast last week or a couple of weeks ago, the VC market is obviously very tight right now. A lot harder to raise money if you're an entrepreneur. But somehow this year, we've raised our prizes. And usually we do $300,000-$400,000 of investment prizes. This year, we're up to $800,000 of investment prizes. And that's really thanks to partners and angel investors that have really decided to put more in recognizing the difficulty that companies are having out there. Now, $800,000 spread across thousands of entrepreneurs is obviously still not a lot of money, but we will be doing a lot more prizes. I'm super excited for that. We did double down with the Rep Matters on the Black Entrepreneur Prize. So we're going to have over $200,000 available for Black entrepreneurs. A lot of our other prizes are back. We've got some grants this year for entrepreneurs. That's free money, non-dilutive. There's a fintech grant of $75,000 from Digital Commerce Group FTQ is back with a grant. And so I'm super excited about those things because these are the things that entrepreneurs want. When we design Startup Fest, it's always entrepreneur first. What do they need? What do they want? What are they looking for? And that's what we're there to deliver on. We tolerate the VCs. Now, obviously, the VCs are an important part of it because that's what for a long period of time and still to this date, this is what the entrepreneurs want. They want visibility, they want money, they want clients, they want connections, they're looking to hire people, whatever it may be. This is what we have to deliver. Look, the other things I guess I'm super excited about this year is, as I was saying earlier, we've gone from less talking heads and more heads talking. So we started to create these mentor tables over the years. And this year, Rebecca and Alistair said, we're going to take that up to another level. We're going to create mentor offices. So that the idea of open office hours. And so we'll have 36 sessions where you got some of the brightest people at Startup Fest that will be available for 90-minute chunks, 3 times a day, 6 offices, delivering not a talk, but answers to your actual questions. So there'll be a legal office. There's going to be an office for HR. There's going to be a bootstrapping office.
So did you say 90 minutes per session?
It's 90. Yeah, we'll be doing 90-minute blocks and we'll be doing 3 per day. And there's 6 offices in total. I think that turns out to 36.
So they have a good amount of time.
Yeah, you got a good amount
That's
of time
good.
to go in and talk to people who have lived the experience. We've never hunted for the big names that sell tickets. Reid Hoffman is great. Obviously, love to have him come. He's welcome to come to Startup Fest. But we really go hunting for those that built the back-end systems, those that have, as Alistair says, dirt under their nails and can really give proper advice. We have a group of mentors, and actually I think you're one of those mentors, Ian, if I'm not mistaken. We've got this new concept of what we're calling PST mentors.
Yes, I am a mentor.
And PST means that these mentors have secrets. They've got secrets because they've done this before. They've raised money. They've been successful at entrepreneurship. Some of these mentors are also past winners of our prizes over the years, and they're here to support our finalists. Amongst all of our prizes, each prize has top 10 finalists for the prize, which ends up by creating 50, 60 entrepreneurs that are really at the top of the game. And so we've got these mentors that are available to really give real concrete advice. It's not legal advice. It's not accounting advice. It's an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur on how to negotiate these terms. You're about to go in for your final pitch, calm them down, pump them up, excite them, and then help them negotiate their terms because they can change the terms. We suggest basic terms, but they have an opportunity. If they go too hot and heavy, as some have in the past, they just don't get selected because this is a group of angels. They're not looking to invest in a $20 million round. So keeping them grounded and helping them out. So as always, super excited about all the mentors that we bring to the table. We actually choose our speakers from our mentor pool. So we don't go out looking for speakers. We go out and our call is for mentors. And if you're willing to give this kind of time to the community, okay, now we're interested in having you as a speaker as well. We don't choose, and not all of the mentors have to be speakers, but
that's really great because then you know that they're there for the right reason. They're not there to get their face on the website and be promoted because they're a speaker at Startup Fest. They're coming in to help people out, and then
we don't pay for speakers. That might be a surprise to some, but we find people that want to give back to the community. They may have something that they're looking to promote, whatever. They're at Carta and Carta wants to get some visibility. That's fine. I think there should always be some value to everybody that comes to Startfest, but nobody is in it just for the 50,000 or 20,000 or more payment, because those types of speakers, it's a job. They come in, they talk, and then they leave.
They leave.
And so we're not interested in speakers that aren't willing to put in the time with the community.
What's been the most rewarding aspect, right? Like you mentioned this milestone that's coming. Like if you could reflect a little bit on this time that you spent, a good chunk of your life and blood, sweat, and tears, I imagine.
Well, I'm not sure I understood the question. I lost a word in there.
What's been the most rewarding?
Oh, the most rewarding. Oh, geez, there's so many rewarding moments. The reality is they come constantly. Whenever I go to an event, I'll meet people and they'll tell me that Startup has changed their lives, or I met my co-founder there, or I got my first round of funding there. I met my first investor there, so it's very rewarding. I'm one of these people that are built to try and make other people's dreams come true. And so I'm constantly fed this feedback loop of, you've helped me. You've done something substantial for me. So I guess it's a little bit ego driven and whatnot. But look, we like what we do. I love working with the team that I work with. We've been together for 15 years. I know that some people don't. I think it's healthy to refer to a team as a family, but when you work with them for 15 years, they are a family.
Well, I've seen you do this for 15 years and team as well. And it's funny, right? It's like you're busy 3 days in the year and then you're off for the next year. Now, joking aside, like I've seen you put that blood, sweat, and tear. And the day of the event, you're not walking around just saying, I'm the founder or whatever. Like he's got the mics, he's rolling up his sleeves and getting the job done. It's clear that you're doing it to help the community. And
Yeah, we're
and
also
for
a
the right
small
reason.
team, so
Yeah.
when the garbage needs to be put out, sometimes that's my job. Yeah, I'm definitely involved in the operations of what we do, but honestly, with the team that's been around for so long, everybody knows what they're doing. So I don't need to focus on speakers. I don't need to
Right.
focus on logistics. But like
You focus on the garbage, right?
I focus on I focus on only the problems that nobody else
Right,
wants to
right.
solve. That's my job.
It was great when we had North Star at the start of the year. Your team helped out.
That's right.
And it felt really great to have people with experience who knew how to organize these big events on the ground with us, making sure things didn't fall apart.
Registration is always a pain for most
Oh, yeah.
organizations. All of a sudden they realize it's 2 days before the event and, oh my God, how are we printing badges? And we don't have staff for this and I was going to do. And then there's huge lineups. And whereas we've done registration now for so many years that it's an easy thing for us to drop in and help other events do things like that.
That line at the entrance is like the right way for people to say negative things about your event, right? You got to manage that line.
Happened to us once that the internet went down, everything went down.
Oh, no.
Literally, the doors opened 2 minutes later, everything went down. And Pamela turned to me and said, look, I think we just got to let in everybody without a badge. What are we going to do? I was like, can't do that. No, it's not an option. Security reasons, a whole bunch of reasons you can't. And so as we're booting up the systems, Natalie, who also works on the team and happens to be my wife, along with Catherine, start to walk around. They went and grabbed coffee and just walked around the line with huge smiles on their face, handing out coffee to everybody. That made a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you give them coffee in line,
Coffee helps.
then they don't complain as much.
Maybe we could wrap up this part of the show because we want to talk about a bit of a roundtable of news. But the first news item is related to the organization of Startupfest. We're sitting in your new office, beautiful new office in Place Victoria. You guys are part of the first tenants of Accès, the new startup hub for Montreal. What motivated the move, right? This is your second office ever, right? You guys were in Westmount forever?
We've been on Green Avenue. We were on Green Avenue for 18 years. Wow. So I guess we're now finally of age.
And big city.
And so we are amongst this cohort of the first people to move into this new space, Accès, and we're super excited. It's a great, super modern. Everything is clean. If beautiful views of the downtown core. We wanted to be here for a couple of reasons. One, we got some new young team members, and being on Green Avenue is fun for those that walk to the office, but it kind of lacked, they didn't get to hang out with the community. They had to go to events to do, whereas being here in a space like this, where there's lots of entrepreneurs and all the support organizations and accelerators are here, healthy for the team to be able
More of a dynamic environment.
Yeah. So less source on just ourselves. So I thought that was an important thing. There's also, look, a lot of the major players are here. A lot of the internationals that'll be invited to Montreal will go through here. It just logically makes sense to be here. But as well, I was one of the original people that came up with Notman House as a place, as a hub for entrepreneurship. And I always regretted that we didn't move into Notman House. And I didn't move in because of the proximity, and I was very close to my house on Green Avenue. And so that was my excuse. But I always regretted not being in Notman House and not living that experience with all the other tenants. I would go often enough, but I always felt, even though I was on the board, I always felt a little bit like an outsider.
Right.
And Notman House is a very important part of our history here in Montreal. You guys were a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
And I figured it was best not to make that mistake again. That this time, if there's a new hub setting up, that we should be at it.
That's a great story. I didn't think about it that way because I knew where you were. I've been at your office on Green, but that makes a lot of sense, right? Making sure you're at the heart of it and not missing out a second time.
Yeah, and then participating in it as well.
Yeah.
And now that we're here, there's lots of spaces, event spaces, meeting rooms and stuff like that. So our hope is to create an environment, a dynamic environment where other people can come and run events alongside us.
And
here.
and we're officially open, correct? The launch
Axie,
was
yeah. Axie was
Monday?
launched out last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Officially, yeah. Yeah. And here it is. Now tenants keep on moving in. As far as I understand, it's pretty much sold out. So there's
Wow.
there's no additional rooms to be rented. There is a great co-working space. I think they're only charging $25 a day. It's everything is brand new and modern. It still smells like
Yeah.
the inside of IKEA.
Yeah, you were showing me the co-working space on Monday. Great view of Square Victoria. So definitely for that price, definitely a great spot to work from.
And so what do you guys think of? There's a lot of ink being spilled as Axie, there's a new startup hub, and now that there's no more Notman as one of the new successors. What are your thoughts on it? I know the jury's still out. Like, I'm very optimistic, very hopeful. And I think, Phil, you mentioned it, like, it's already almost sold out, right? Like, I know a few startups that are here, so it's super promising. Curious to hear you guys on what are your high-level thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great next chapter for Montreal. I think in some ways we're still building up momentum post-COVID. And with Notman shutting down, a lot of people were looking for a place to work from. A lot of people have been scrambling, running around the city, trying to find event space. So it's nice to have a little bit of a home base for the community. I think things are just getting started. So I think we'll see how things unfold. I've mentioned it before. A community space like Axie or Notman is about the people who are in the space. It's not about the building. And so they've done, I think, a great job of being welcoming and including a lot of people in the discussions of what Axie could be. And so I think if they take that approach going forward and they continue to include people, it should be great.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a spot, like a place like this missing. The container is now there. And then we need to fill it with the right content and make sure that it becomes what it can become, which is a great place to start a business or run your business. But there was definitely a gap. So
yeah, there's no Notman House was extra special. Yes, it was a physical space, but it had this history, the building. You felt the hundreds of years of people going through it. And we were just there temporarily in the flow of it. A space like this, I don't think any space could ever be that again.
right.
And yes, the people matter, but this will be different. This will, and first of all, it has much more institutional support.
Yeah.
So large banks, governments, there's a lot of energy being put behind this place to make it a shining example of what Quebec and Canada Quebec and Montreal has to offer. But I think for us that to live the experience of Notman House, it's almost a little bit sad. I think ultimately it would have been great to have both spaces.
Yeah.
One where a very grungy grassroots things can happen without necessarily having any money and sponsors and government input. And there's really this grungy grassroots environment. And then you somehow graduate into a space like this. It didn't work out, obviously, but
There was certainly something special about, for those who may not know, but William Notman was a famous photographer. He was an entrepreneur himself. That was his residence. And there was this tie back into the history of entrepreneurship in Canada, which this space is brilliant where we are in today. But
There's
at the
a
end,
tie-in, there's a tie in here because we're actually in the floor of the Montreal Stock Exchange. So there is a little bit of that energy
I didn't know that.
of entrepreneurship.
It's good
So,
to know that.
We're maybe a sneak peek. We're going to have a live TechPoutine podcast in a little while, which we'll be announcing soon. So we're trying to bring some of that startup energy here. Yeah. And the distinction is like the container and the startups are going to be the content. And I think Quebec Tech is going to be that umbrella organization that's helping to propulse the startups.
I think it was nice. Several people from the Axie team acknowledged that Notman was an important kind of stepping stone for Axie to exist. I think Notman in many ways was the MVP in terms of proving that there's product market fit, that there's demand for this type of space. When we first opened Notman, people thought it would be a white elephant and nobody would come. And
it was a good 10-year run. Yeah, you know, what impressed me, there were some John Stokes, others that were more than part of Notman House, the leaders of Notman House, that came to the opening here at Axie. It's a very different environment, obviously, and where you would imagine and expect that somebody like that would be a little bit jaded, maybe vindictive about the fact that a fraction of the amount of money that was put in here could have saved Notman House. But what impressed me was that people said, okay, this is the new space. How do we make it great?
Yeah.
And that really, I think, speaks to the maturity and the selflessness of the people that were in Notman House and led Notman House. Okay, we may have ultimately had to let Notman House go, but that doesn't mean that we don't care about the community or that we're somehow want this to fail. No, to the contrary, it's okay. This is the thing. How do we make this work?
Entrepreneurship at its best, right? Like you evolve, you move on, and you make the next thing better.
I think we've come full circle, guys. I think it's a pretty good place to wrap up. I wanted to maybe thank Phil for his time and for Startup Fest. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good wrap up. So yeah, thanks for your time, Phil.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to TechPoutine. If you like the show, please subscribe or leave a review.